We've been hard at work on our annual Bike of the Year test, and after thousands of miles of testing, the results are in. In this year's test, we covered the race, endurance road bike and gravel bike categories, with winners crowned in each category and an overall winner selected by our fine testers. And stay tuned to the end to see that. I'm thrilled to be joined by Warren Rossiter and Ashley Quinlan, who are behind this year's tests. But before we go any further, I'm going to tell you about Autotrail and the Expedition 68. These are purpose-built camper vans for cyclists, and this year's Bike of the Year couldn't have been possible without the support of Autotrail, the UK's leading motorhome and camper van manufacturer. Autotrail has more than 40 years of experience pushing boundaries, embracing cutting-edge technologies, and designing solutions to enhance the van life experience. And the good news for you as a rider? Autotrail's Expedition 68 range is designed with cyclists front of mind. The range includes 3 models, all with an integrated bike garage and pull-out bike trays. It's a no-compromise camper van for cyclists who want to head out onto the open road to explore new terrain with convenience and in comfort. With a 140 brake horsepower engine as standard, 200-watt solar panels, a 75 amp-hour leisure battery, and a pop-top roof option, the Expedition 68 is designed to unleash your sense of adventure. Head to autotrail.co.uk for more information or click the link in the description. Thank you again to Autotrail for sponsoring this year's Bike of the Year test. And now back to the video. Now this year's test has been run a little bit different with a switch compared to our usual Bike of the Year format. I was completely removed from this. These fine men were the ones behind it, and I'm going to hand over very gracefully to Ash Quinlan, who's going to talk you through how we changed things up this year.
Yeah, so this year we decided to do things a little bit differently. Bike of the Year each year is generally a celebration of the bikes, the best bikes that are out there in a given year. And this year we decided to change things a little bit in order to celebrate those bikes that we have reviewed up until this point over the course of the year since the previous Bike of the Year in 2024. So that's just over a year this year, so we're running a little bit later this year, which is absolutely fine. And it just means that we're able to take a bit of a more holistic view over the bikes that we've been hands-on, as you say, over thousands of miles of testing over the year in order to create our Bike of the Year product this year.
Warren, how many Bike of the Years have you done now?
I don't know.
A lot.
A lot. It's been over a decade's worth. So thousands of bikes, tens of thousands of miles. But it's still a lot of fun. I mean, changing it up, doing it a little bit different this year has actually given me a lot more time on the bikes, which has been really interesting. To the point that this year, I mean, these 2 bikes, which from my categories this year, I am going to be really, really sad when they go.
Yes, I'm sure you've become very fond of them over your test.
Incredibly fond, you know. So fond that, you know, I might be having to reach into my pocket, but I do have to actually move some bikes on if I've got to somehow come up with a 1-in, 1-out policy soon.
Things are definitely pretty intense. Warren's garage is a thing of legend, and I can't imagine the Bike of the Year test is very productive in, as you say, reducing the fleet overall.
No, absolutely not.
So, Ash, you know, Bike of the Year has evolved over time. I actually remember it wasn't that long ago we introduced a gravel bike category. Gravel bikes are very, very important now, as we know, but we have very much honed in this year on race, endurance, and gravel. What's the sort of rationale behind picking those over the many other gazillions of disciplines that we could have focused on?
Well, it's to do with what our readers at home like to read about.
You mean that we use data to inform our decisions?
We do
don't
indeed.
Just pull things out of thin air. Oh, interesting.
We do indeed. Yes. So it's basically these are the 3 categories that we know our readers love to read about back home. When they're either getting a Cycling Plus magazine, reading it on BikeRadar.com, watching it on the YouTube channel, or on our podcast. So we chose to focus on those this year.
The endurance bike is one I think is definitely worth further discussion. I know one we've kind of chatted a bit offhand about that, how it fits in with all road bikes, gravel bikes, but like the endurance road bike is definitely something you are uniquely interested and passionate about. So it's interesting to see it maintained in the test when it isn't like the flashiest, newest, most innovative, out there discipline. Like what for you makes this interesting to test?
I think the thing with the endurance road bike is it's evolved to the point now where they're as good as any race bike, but they're just for people who don't race. And that is just so much more practical, isn't it? You know, if you look at any other, you know, if we're talking mediums of transport, you know, the car of the year, it's never, you know, a track prepped Ferrari. It's always a, you know, a good practical but usually quite stylish car. And I think the endurance bike is just the equivalent of that. Day to day, just as fast, so much more practical, still as much fun.
Wow, it's actually quite a good anecdote. I might steal that one. That's really good. In terms of testing then, Ash, like, talk me through the practicalities of, like, what did you do? What did you do? How did you decide on these particular bikes, and how are we here today in the studio discussing the winners?
So as I mentioned, we've been testing bikes all the way through the year. That gives us a really good back catalogue upon which that we can kind of draw upon, and good reference points for this year. So it's not like each year necessarily bikes are getting better. They are, generally speaking, but it's not like we look at this and say, well, last year's Bike of the Year winner therefore should be this year's Bike of the Year winner, because nothing's beaten it. It's always about what's come in the year that we've just had. So we sort of top that up through the year. We come together. We have discussed, what we think are the sort of the leading lights, if you like, the most innovative bikes, or the most, downright impressive bikes. It could also be the most practical bikes in theory. And we come together, decide which ones that we think are sort of worthwhile sort of consideration within that, and then we have a discussion about which are the finalists. And this is all based on the testing that we've already done, reviews that are already on BikeRadar.com that we've already published. And then we ascertain as to whether we're going to run the same model, or we could, and in this case, this year we have run new models, different kinds of specs models, because they represent something that's a little bit different to our audience.
Interesting. So yes, gravel, endurance, and race. And we're going to actually kick off with gravel, Warren, one of your categories. And I'd like to first hear what your highly commended bikes were and how they made the cut for this year's test.
I mean, it's been an absolutely huge year for gravel. There have been so many launches, so many interesting new bikes out there. So a lot of the sort of the species has evolved to the point now where in every sort of subcategory of gravel, so be it like your aero race gravel bike, they're good now. The early ones were fantastic in a straight line, but you put them on anything rough and you're in trouble.
I always remember the BMC Caius when you tested that, which was like, not really that far off an endurance road bike, to be honest.
Oh no, absolutely not.
It looks so different to the current crop of.
Back when I tested that one, I've got basically a 70-mile gravel loop that I test all these bikes on, and there's a couple of sections on it which are kind of, there's basically about 10 miles of just big wide open gravel road out on the plain.
Where did you find that in the UK? I was going to say real gravel roads in the UK.
Roads, yeah. It's down on Salisbury Plain. Bit trickier now because there's a lot of military there, but that Caius was the fastest on that section. But on anything else, single track in the woods, any sort of trail, it was by far the slowest. It was scary to ride in the rough, bullet fast on the road, bullet fast on smooth gravel, and so it's kind of, I don't know what this bike is, and it doesn't fit the remit of what I want from a gravel bike. But I think now this year we've seen bikes like Villiers' new Rave SLR ID2.
Wicked looking bike.
Fabulous looking bike. Super aero. Can take up to a 55mm tyre. Astonishingly good on the road. Very good off-road. Cervelo's Aspero 5. Completely different beast to the Cervelo Aspero. It's kind of, they've taken like the Soloist, a bit of Soloist, a bit of R5, a bit of S5, and smashed it into a gravel bike. And again, that's sort of an evolution from those early bikes like the BMC. It's much more capable off-road. It's still not my ideal choice, but then we've also seen bikes that I think they've had to push boundaries before they've pulled back. And so, if you remember bikes like the Chamois Hagar or Nuke-Proof Digger RS, super long, super slacked out, like gravity-focused gravel bikes, basically. Amazingly good downhill. Everywhere else, a bit of a chore. And now we've seen that evolve a little bit. So we've had bikes like this year, like fabulous bike, Mondraker's Arid RR Carbon, fantastic bike, super mountain bike inspired, but they've reined it back a bit to make it just more usable everywhere. And we've just seen in that gravel sphere, bikes are finally becoming what they always should have been, and it still gives you that wide choice. There's still plenty of options out there at all price levels as well. I've recently tested a few cheaper alloy gravel bikes, been hugely impressed with them. Focus Atlas, brilliant bike. Boardman's cheap ADV, incredibly capable for a bike that's only just over £1,000. On a kind of flip of that, specialised aluminium crooks. which is the best cyclocross bike Specialized never made. So I'm really, really enjoyed the gravel sort of aspects this year, and we've seen, the evolution of full suspension coming into gravel with the latest Topstone, or a bike I've currently got and I'm playing around with, Lee Coogan Innova. I've got some fun plans for that. So yeah, I've been really, really impressed with where gravel's gone. It is that thing where they've pushed boundaries in all directions to find where the limits are, and so now the bikes are becoming so much better all-rounders.
And what made the cut for the final three? Who were your picks?
Well, our final head-to-head was the Parley Teos versus the Mondraker Arid RR. Very similar geometry bikes, very similar, the way they looked, but sort of pitched differently. Mondraker obviously coming from a mountain bike background, it was all about the more kind of technical stuff, whereas Parley with the Teos kind of aimed it as more of your all-rounder. It's a bike you could race, but you can take to the trails. And the nuances between the two were very, very close. It's just, one was just that bit more refined everywhere, and therefore just was the better, the better all-rounder.
Go on, be a tease or been enough of a tease. Who won this year?
It's the Parley Teos.
Behind me?
It is behind you. Just a fabulously well proportioned geometry of it, superb handling, so much fun to ride, fast enough on the road, so capable on gravel at speed, and a lot of fun on some tight twisty single track trails, and taking it places where sort of gravel stalwarts will say gravel bikes shouldn't go. But I think there's a certain joy to being ever so slightly underbiked. Mm-hmm. But weirdly, on both that and the Mondraker, I never felt completely, totally underbiked on it. Even riding like full on, mountain bike trails, it was I just had a blast.
And what kind of edged it out versus the Mondraker? What kind of cinched the deal for you with this one?
It has just slightly better on road manners. So riding between gravel, it was just a nicer experience, and it's just the way the frame's made. It just has that. When you're riding on the limit, you can feel that the frame's sort of working with you. There's a few instances where on the Arid where the stiffness that they put into it to make it so efficient to ride quickly can get a bit teeth jarring. And although saying that, on both of those bikes, I never felt like I needed. There's a lot of gravel bikes you go, well, this is so much better with suspension, and on both of these, I never felt that. Probably more so on the Parley, even though it is suspension corrected. So if you wanted to go down that route, you could. But it's just that bit more refined.
In terms of price, obviously they are quite different. So the Mondraker Arid came in at like 5.8, and this is what 9.3 ish.
Yeah.
Quite a big disparity in those. I imagine there's obviously builds from either brand which would bring them sort of closer in the middle.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How did you kind of take that into consideration?
I think it's something that I mulled for quite a while, because they do have fairly similar builds as well. They're both force axis Explore. They both got all carbon componentry throughout. I think the Parley has the edge because they have the better wheel set, but it purely came down to the quality feel from the Parley, from the frame, from just the way it handles, how smooth it was, yet how stiff it was, the balance that it just gets everything right. And normally I'm the first person to decry something if it's too expensive, but in this case, I truly thought you get what you pay for. It's just that bit more elevated.
Yeah, and I think as well, you could argue something like a Parley is a fairly, I'm being slightly unkind here, but like a fairly niche option in the grand scheme of things. It isn't a Mondraker or a Cannondale or whatever. But it's a brand which has always, I felt, been quite cutting edge, quite influential, I dare say, in the space. And this was a bike that was really popular on site when we first wrote about it. So, yeah.
I mean, I've had a few conversations with the guys at Parley, because obviously their Z series bikes, the custom bikes, are all handmade in Massachusetts. All the carbon's laid up there. But the Teos and the Ure, they're super sort of do it all road bike. For the first time, they've moved production over into Europe. They're being made in Portugal. And I was chatting with them the other day, and they were sort of saying that the guys that they're using in Portugal were super high-end craft manufacturers, but they've shared a lot of their secrets of the Z series bikes with those guys to make these frames as good as possible. And if you compare them to their old Far Eastern made off the peg frames, Party were telling me that these frames cost them 35% more than what the Asian made frames cost. And so, you know, they might not be bespoke, custom made to fit. They're very, very high end manufactured. And if you look at the, you know, this Taos that we've got here, which is left in the raw carbon finish, so every element of how that's been constructed you can inspect and look at. And I've spent too long just doing that. And also I love the wax finish, because if you go out and, you know, I've dropped it a couple of times and sort of gone, oh no, that's bad. You just give it a clean, get some wax out, buff it, no scratches on it.
Yeah, very clever. Just on this, like the headline that you published this on the site, you said, I quote, "This is the best all-round gravel bike I've ever tested." Now, obviously things change over time. People are always going to have like new favourite picks. But what did this kind of supplant? What was your previous favourite kind of in the similar category?
It's probably the bike I own. You know, it's a Cannondale Topstone Lab 71. That was the bike that did it for me. So, you know, I bought a Lab 71 frame set, built it up into my spec, been riding it a long time. In fact, I've just after we've finished here, I'm going up to the workshop to grab it, because our Ace mechanic wheels just giving it a little bit of service for me.
Nice.
I've got to go back and ride that now.
Poor you.
Wow, what a shame. My heart bleeds.
But yeah. I mean, it's, you know, the gravel thing has evolved so much. I mean, I've never really got rid of any of my gravel bikes. So I've got the original Cannondale Slate, which I still love. I mean, that's just such a fun bike. I've got the second generation GT Grade.
A bike which you were hugely complimentary of.
Again, another bike that I just liked so much I had to buy. I might be able to soon open some sort of gravel museum.
Making a note on the Cannondale Slate. This is you should never mention things that you like, because I'm like, it's probably a good reflective piece in the Cannondale Slate, because it's odd, but it's a great example of a bike that, similar to bikes of a few years ago, really pushed things forward, and then when it kind of came back, there's definitely been this sort of like ebb and tide of gravel bike development, and it has been a really cool year for gravel bike tech.
I mean, the fun thing with the original Cannondale Slate was that they didn't really launch it so much as I was on the launch of the first disc-equipped Super 6 Evo in Austria, and at the back of the tent they had a Slate, and I was talking to Dave Devine, who's the head of product. He wasn't then; he was just one of the designers, and I was like, "Oh my god, what's that?" And they were kind of, the reason they made it was the design team at Cannondale. It was the bike they wanted, and so there was no commercial reason for it. They just made this mad aluminium 650B gravel bike with a carbon lefty, and it was kind of. And I looked at it and went, I don't know anyone would ever need that, but my God, I really want one. And it, you know, when I got hold of one to test, it didn't let me down. And it was a mad spec. You know, the original one I had, which, you know, had 2x Ultegra with a 5236 and an 1128 cassette. It was kind of, you've put sort of semi-pro race gear in on this bike that's supposed to go off road. It doesn't have that anymore. It's now got 1x. But for a long time, it was kind of, I love this bike, but it's mad. It's this, you know. But I love to see that in bike design, you know, that people have made something not for a commercial reason, not for a, you know, not because, this will make us a lot of money. It's like, I really want to ride this. That's why we made it.
I think there's a really nice thread that links all of these. Like, the Slate was pretty far out as far as bikes go, and we've, totally gone through this path with gravel bike development, and now ended up with something like the Power League. It is so different from how gravel started out, and sorry guys, but I can't wait to see what Bike of the Year 2026 looks like, because there's already going to be cool stuff that's going to go in there. And on the road race bike side of things, we had a wonderful video from our new presenter Ollie Smith speculating about the future of road race bikes. Definitely check that out, because maybe Ash's test next year will include some of those elements. But back to the here and now, Ashley Quinlan, the same question to you. What went into this year's road race category? Tell me the top 3 contenders, how you arrived on them. Give us the juice.
So we had 5 contenders, but there were 3 that earned highly commended. They were the Scott Addict RC, which I reviewed. It must be 3 months ago now. I'm a test road, and I think that came with the headline of being one of the most refined sort of all-round race bikes with sort of a lightweightish kind of race
Beat
bike.
me to it. I was off to go find the headline.
Yeah.
It is exactly it. One of the most refined race bikes. It might be the most refined lightweight road bike I've ever ridden.
Well,
very definitive.
I like to mitigate a little bit just in case.
Yeah.
But no, it's one of my favourites that I've ever ridden, and certainly deserved recognition. The Van Rysel RCR Pro. Yes, that's
the climbing, but not the aero.
That's the
RCR
climbing.
F,
Yes. So we reviewed that a good 6 to 8 months ago now. Liam Cahill, RIP. He reviewed that one, and it scored extremely highly, 4.5 stars, and was like one of the best value race bikes that he had ever ridden. It's just a very well-rounded package. You don't have to spend mega money for it. And then there's Trek Madone SLR, which is probably the earliest bike that I reviewed in this year's cohort. I think it went. I think we published that at the back end of last year, potentially start of this year. That simply for the continued innovation around having the ISOFlow seat tube. It's a very quick bike. They've refined it. They blended the Amonda in with the Madone sort of platform there with that one, and that was an excellent bike too.
So what came down? What was the final head-to-head?
Well, the final head-to-heads, and you'll be able to read these reviews on BikeRadar.com right now.
Great website.
Yeah, it could only be like 2 really, because I tried to argue it any which way. I tried to justify including other bikes and looked at it from different angles, but they're the 2 race bikes that have made all the headlines this year that have been launched, and that's the new Cervelo S5, ridden by Jonas Vingegaard at the 2025 Tour de France, and the Colnago Y1 RS, ridden by Tadej Pogacar, and won with Tadej Pogacar at the 2025 Tour de France. And they both sort of espouse this kind of the latest thinking on aero race bike tech. In previous years, we've gone down the all-rounder style route for the kind of our race bikes, performance bikes categories. So occasionally we change the name of them, but ultimately that's what they are. But this year, for their kind of cutting edge innovation, as well as their profile, as well as the interest, and the fact that they are right at the forefront of pro racing right now, they deserved recognition, not only for that, but also because of how they take slightly different approaches to basically making a bike go fast.
So you aping the very best of the World Tour pros, Ash, through your extensive testing, which came out on top and why?
Well, this may surprise some watchers at home, but it was the Cervelo S5 that came out on top.
Looking very handsome, sat behind you as well.
There it is. Yeah, massive head tube there, if you can just see that.
Yes.
And that may come as a surprise to some who may think that the Y1 RS is deserving of being our bike of the year. It's effectively dominated the Tour de France, being ridden by Pogacar. I tend to think it's the rider more than the bike necessarily that's achieved that.
But you are not Tadej Pogacar.
I am not.
Maybe he is watching, but I think it's quite unlikely that he will be. So I think that's a fair caveat.
Yeah, I think so. But I think it's an odd thing to say, but it almost boiled down to sort of the spec completeness and the value. The ride, as much as they look slightly different, with the Y1 RS has got its offset seat tube versus this one, which is kind of curved around the wheels, but the front ends are very similar in that they've got like this bayonet style fork, so it's a free floating kind of front end to the head tube, which allows it to extend forward without moving where the effective steerer is. Neither has a traditional steerer tube in that sense. The Y1 RS has basically a through axle style design which attaches everything through from the bottom of the fork crown. So there are some similarities up front and then some big differences out back. But ultimately it does come down to sort of spec completeness.
How do the two ride in comparison to one another?
Very similar, as I said. I'd say the S5 feels slightly more refined. We tend to use that word a lot these days in sort of when we're describing bikes, because sort of especially with UCI ratified bikes, they tend not to push the boundaries. You don't make quantum leaps anymore. You make like slight iterations, and so you're always just polishing. You're polishing on top of a polished bike already, really. But it feels that slightly bit more refined. I wouldn't call them either of them compliant, but just a little bit more well-rounded for the S5, slightly more stable in crosswinds. I would suggest, but that is, very much. I've had to do hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles in some kind of changeable conditions around my local area in order to work that out, and swap the wheels over as well to make sure that there's because there was a bit of difference in that spec. But ultimately the S5 just feels that tiny bit more refined, a little bit more rounded. I would even say slightly stiffer as well. That's got a huge bottom bracket area, really oversized, that just laps up any effort I can put into it. And that's my maximum power that I can put into it. Yes, Pogacar can put in more, and Vingegaard can put in more on their bikes, but I'm really giving it the beans there, and I can't elicit any kind of flex at all.
In terms of spec, you say that bike is more well-rounded. What specifically do you mean in that?
So in the specs that we had, they were actually just £1, one British pound apart in terms of their RRP.
Interesting, very
so
common.
So at £12,000 for the S5 and 11,999 for the Y1 RS. I hope they've got that the right way round off the top of my memory. But
I don't think anyone's going to pull you apart.
Hopefully not. Please don't. But essentially for the S5, you get better wheels by quite a margin, I would say. And wheels for the S5, they're new reserve wheels that have been made sort of in tandem with the frame to dovetail quite nicely. I think it says 6.3 watts according to the brand at 50k an hour. I wish I was riding at that speed all the time, but there we go.
Of course.
So the wheels are better. I think the tyres are slightly better too. As well when you compare them, but also these are race bikes, and the S5 comes with a dual-sided 4eyes power meter that Simon von Bromley, our power meter expert, has reviewed.
Unwilling power meter expert.
Exactly, he does enjoy it. The Precision Pro 3 Pro, I think it's called. And you get that for the £12,000, and that's an obscene amount of money anyway. I understand that. I'm not saying for a second that that's good value. Mm-hmm. However, if you're in the market for these kind of bikes, or you want the best of the best, and this is what you want to spend your money on, you are justified in wanting to have it come with ready to race, train with out of the box. And I think with racers these days relying ever more on power as well, it's such an important thing to have. You can have that with the Y1 RS. You go through their custom program. You can spec up the bike on the Colnago website, but you also go through a dealer and do this. You can spec Envy SES 4.5 wheels, which until this year Pogacar was racing on, and you can put on a power meter aftermarket as well, but that costs extra money. You're spending towards £15,000 in order to achieve the same kind of level of build. Yes, it's not precisely the same, but that's what you're spending.
That's absolutely wild.
It's a wild amount of money, isn't it? It is absolutely crazy.
I think the funny thing with all this is the 12 grand bikes of this world, of which there are no shortage. You are pretty much picking splitting hairs, yes, when you are comparing these two, but there is a market for them. Apart from the fact people just looking at shiny bikes, people click on them because they're expensive. Yeah. You do actually see these bikes out and about. So yeah, for that small audience, this will be a very useful test. But clearly, it's the more lower down in the range where people are serious racers, want to actually buy these bikes. It will be likely a shopping consideration. Clearly, the market for the Y1 RS is going to be smaller, but the S5 still proves itself clearly through your testing as a really competent race bike. I was trying to look there in my notes as we were going. I actually can't recall exactly when, so I'm going to nod it was because I'm sure he'll remember. But this S5 isn't actually that wildly different, really, from when it initially launched in 2018, 17 maybe.
The first of the bayoneted fronted ones was around 2017. I was on the launch.
Yeah,
and it just really strikes.
But the thing with it is they've evolved that bike, and they've brought as the UCI's rules have, shall we say, relaxed. They've enhanced what they already had, and it is the it's a groundbreaking bike, and totally. You can see its influence all over. But I think more generally, what we've seen this year on the race bike front is, and it's sort of what I always used to say about aero race bikes was, I love riding them, but they're like having a track day car. It's fantastic for racing around the circuit. My God, I don't want to drive it home. And I felt exactly the same way about aero bikes. Fantastic for going to have a blast out on, but I wouldn't want to ride it every day. Now, this year, we're finally seeing that, because aero bikes have come more towards the all-round race bike or the climber bike or the lightweight bike, they are converging, and we're actually getting bikes now which you could ride every day. You could use to race and to train and to do everything on. Whereas previously they were like a specialist tool, they were a special stage tool, and now they've evolved enough that they can be a general race bike.
The geometry is a little bit more well-rounded as well now, and the handlebars, yes, they're all proprietary, especially because they have to sit atop the bayonet fork, and
those first original aero road bikes were effectively time trial bikes with drop bars put on them.
Not far off, So might not have won the Tour de France, but it's won Bike of the Year, and I know which is the bigger prize, surely, for Cervelo.
Well, I think so. And there's one small anecdote before we move on as well. When we went to film these bikes, and get some footage for them, and go on a ride out on the Brecon Beacons in Wales, it was the Y1RS that turned most heads. So there's definitely desirability there. Like, so someone even was driving up over the top of Gospel Pass, weren't they, and stopped beside us and said, "Oh, I haven't seen one of those in the flesh yet." Yeah. And there's me fiddling around with the S5, and Warren standing just next to the Y1RS, and
Italian tourist.
Really?
Yeah. And he just stopped with his family in the car, just decided he wanted to have an ogle at it for a bit. And it shows there's desirability there, and I respect anyone who follows through on that. And the Y1RS is an excellent bike. However, it's hard to look past the S5, and there's lower point of entry as well. You can have one for around $9,000 with Ultegra Di2, which I think Warren and I both agreed is the group set that we would pick without spend our own money on. Or you're just having a slight downgrade of hubs, but many people would opt for a DT Swiss 240 hub over a 180 anyway. So you're not losing very much by dropping down to that level, and that's probably what most racers will end up buying anyway.
Yes, those racers with those deep pockets I don't have. Anyway,
yes.
Onto the endurance category. As I said, Warren, definitely the Warren Rossiter special subject on Mastermind. I would say this would be the endurance bike. I'm very curious to hear about this one, because I think a fair assessment would be that the endurance bike has sort of like quietly evolved in quite a significant way in recent years, and you've written some really good pieces along those lines, but it certainly isn't like the headline grabbing category that gravel bikes are or aero race bikes are. But on the back end of BikeRadar, to let you behind the curtain, it is by far the most popular category of bike on site. So I'm very keen to hear what made this year's test, the sort of context around it, and what won.
I think this year, thankfully, the endurance bike, and it's a trend that sort of started a couple of years ago. I mean, initially the trend was, hey, everybody, the endurance bike is sort of, we don't know what it is, so let's turn it into an all-road bike. So let's have a road bike, but put bike packing fittings on it. And it's like, well, why have you done this? I never really understood it, because they weren't as good as gravel bikes on gravel. And they were becoming heavier and more complicated than what an endurance bike should be. And let's not forget that the endurance bike, masters of the genre, all started out as race bikes. The Roubaix was designed for Paris-Roubaix. Mm-hmm. The Domani was designed for the Spring Classics. The Cannondale Synapse was, their more comfortable bike for all the Spring Classics. As well as all these bikes started out in a racing arena. And
that's why they were popular as well, because they were fast but comfortable. Wow, almost what most people would want.
Exactly, yeah. But when they arrived, most of the pro riders and most of the pro bikes, comfort was a dirty word. And I think, thankfully now, it isn't. That's why we've seen, not only because of the rolling resistance benefits of going to a wider tyre, the comfort benefits are there as well. So it's kind of, it's like the world is shifting towards endurance bikes. And if you talk to all the major brands, by far and away on the road side of things, endurance is their biggest selling bike. And we saw it with last year's winner, Giant's New Defy, super lightweight, beautiful on the road, made no concession to being all road. It was a pure road bike for people that aren't racing, and it was so good for it. And so that's what we've seen this year. But we're still seeing bikes that are taking a bit of influence from other areas, and that's fine. It's just when it overwhelms it. So great bikes I've seen this year: Cervelo Caledonia 5. The Caledonia was always a great bike. It's moved back towards the road a little bit this time. Slightly more aggressive geometry, more consideration to aero. Beautiful bike, really, really impressive. We've also seen at the low end, more affordable end, Cube Attain C62, phenomenal value. Like,
Bonkers value.
bonkers value for money bike. And then we've even seen other materials back, which I'm also really excited about. Ribble brought out the all-road SL and SLR, and it's a stupid name because it's not all-road, it's pure road. It takes much more influence from its aero race bikes than it does from anything gravel orientated. So great bike, silly name, but they've got iterations of that bike now, entertaining with 3D printed looks. It looks gorgeous and it's not expensive. Or one of my old favourites, Surly, the Midnight Special.
Oh wow!
Just skinny steel, beautiful geometry, lovely ride, inexpensive, brilliant. And so we're seeing all that. But my two top bikes this year, and it's actually bikes that I tested earlier in the year in completely different specs. So we had the Boardman's new SLR, which is an evolution of the SLR that when it first came out, it was a race bike, and over the years it's moved more and more to the endurance space, and it's all the better for it. And so earlier in the year, I tested, I think it was the 9.2 with like 105 Di2, really good alloy wheels, and it was phenomenally cheap. It's like half the price of any other 105 Di2 bike out there, and certainly not half the bike, if you know what I mean. So I wanted a new version of that to take advantage of a limited edition they brought out called the 9.4 Limited. Phenomenal bike, 50mm deep carbon wheels, great tyres, new SRAM rival axis group set, and a £600 one-piece carbon bar on a bike that costs £3,100. Insane. I mean, that's the same bar that likes of Cannondale, Merida use on Pro Tour bikes. It's a Pro Tour proven cockpit on a bike at £3,100. It's just insane. I don't know how they've done it.
Yeah, we even saw one when we went to the Tour de France. We even saw one on the X-Lab bikes that Tim Astana are riding as well. And I thought, there's no way that's the same one. And I had to look at it closer. I went, oh no, it is. It is the same. It's the same handlebar that they're using on the World Tour. It was unbelievable to have it on a bike at that price.
And it's just a fabulous bike. Just so good, And if that's your budget and you're in the market for an endurance bike, go and get one now because they will sell out. They will sell out so quickly because it's such a capable bike. And it's a good-looking bike.
It is a good-looking bike. I was just clicking through there. It was £2,500 for the SLR 9.2, which was the other one you were referencing. Yeah. And the other one looks just that little bit more handsome. They are like proper dialed bikes from a brand and a retailer, which like you wouldn't necessarily expect such a refined bike from. It's a real step change for Boardman as a brand as a whole.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, but you can't ignore their bikes now. Their gravel bikes this year I've been super impressed with, and talking to some of the guys over on the mountain bikes, there are a few real stars in Boardman's mountain bike lineup as well. And so it's sort of ignore them at your peril, really.
And what was the other?
The other was Cannondale's new Synapse. Early in the year I had the pleasure of testing the Lab 71 version, which basically exactly the same spec as Lachlan Morton set an insane record of the 14,000 kilometre lap of Australia, which he averaged over 450 kilometres a day.
Disgusting.
Which is mad. It's an incomprehensible speed, which shows that bike's capable of being quick. Now, the Lab 71 was quite interesting, quite divisive. It had a 1x drivetrain on it for a start.
Yeah, like an Explorer. I'm just looking at it now. An Explorer derailleur, 1x, like quite gravel-like gearing, but then mid-depth wheels, road tyres, wide road tyres, admittedly. Yeah, unusual bike.
So I was reluctant to just keep that one in because it is 13,000, I think.
Oh, hang on, I'll check.
It would have been the most expensive bike of the year.
£13,000.
Yeah, so I was like, no, I don't really want that one. Let's have a look at something else in the range. But also I wanted to make sure that I got a bike equipped with SmartSense. Now, Cannondale for the new Synapse split the range. If you buy a Shimano equipped bike, you don't get SmartSense. If you buy a SRAM equipped bike, you get SmartSense, which kind of made that. So we ended up with the Carbon 2 SmartSense, which is new force axis, and the SmartSense integration, which people don't know. It came out on the last generation of Synapse, but although I liked it, it had its issues. Like, it was fairly clunky. Like,
it was quite inelegant, I think.
It was very inelegant. The front light, in the UK spec, it was STVZO, so it wasn't a brilliant light.
Yeah, quite meagre.
It was quite meagre output. It was quite chunky. It wasn't that smartly integrated into the bike. But it did what what you wanted. Central battery, powering everything, front light, rear light, Garmin radar on the back. Super idea. And the old one had an external battery which fitted in a sort of recess on the down tube.
It was very like original Di2, like
Yes.
the external batteries. Yeah.
I mean, my Topstone is of the same era, so it does have that port on the down tube where you could fit a SmartSense system. But thankfully, Cannondale make a mini toolkit that fits in there, so no SmartSense. I'll just use that. But this new version, and it came out at the time, when everybody was like, "Oh, we've spotted the new Synapse," and Lachlan's riding it, and they've dumped SmartSense, but they hadn't. It's just so beautifully integrated. Nobody noticed that it had the lights on it. So we did that whole lap of Australia using SmartSense, and actually using it, having daytime running lights. Everybody has them on their car. We're much more vulnerable on the road being on a bike. Why wouldn't you be running daytime running lights? You've got that radar telling you the traffic's approaching from behind at speed, and it will colour code and it will give you audible warnings. Fantastic bit of additional safety. And I also love the fact that it's all powered off one central battery. And on this bike, that also means it powers the access system as well.
Oh, interesting. I actually hadn't clocked that.
Yeah. So you've got one single battery that does everything. It stows away in the down tube storage. You can pull it out to charge it. You can charge it on the bike. And the other cool thing is when you open that little down tube storage port, it turns a light on like you're opening a fridge door. I never get tired of that.
I that had completely slipped by me. I've seen access equipped bikes when they have like on e-bikes. I can see the cable running in, but I was totally unaware that that's how that worked. Yeah. That is very cool.
And it's just a super smart system. It gives you a great app where you can monitor the system. It will warn you of anything. You can do all the settings on the lights. You can, the lights have got so many different modes. It's got if you're riding with your mates, it's got a peloton mode, so it will turn the front light down a little bit and it won't flash the rear light, so you're not blinding anybody following you. And you can do all that from the app. It monitors the system. The app also counts as like your security and warranty, so you can lock the bike down when you're not on it, so it won't turn on. And all the information there, it brings up error codes, all that sort of thing. And then you throw in the SRAM Axis, ecosystem. It's the future of bikes. There's so much data to be drawn from it. There's so much, actual control over it. It's like, bikes before this, you felt like, oh, I'm riding a Victorian invention, and which you are. This one, it feels 21st century.
I think you probably
and I'm all in on that.
Yeah, I have to say I'm in full agreement with Woz on this. I'm very much I like cycling to be quite traditional. Yes, I quite like my Di2, electronic gears as well. But ultimately, I like cycling to be an escape from our daily technology. However, this technology that's in the Synapse is just fundamentally. It makes riding safer. It's incredibly usable. It's so well integrated. It's not like it adds that much weight, I don't believe either. And I could easily see this being sort of even could end up being mandatory and sort of like dim lighting for racing.
You have just fired up the comments there.
I know, but I can it should be something that all bikes in the future should have. And would make everyone safer.
And it's the thing with this is you can sort of see where I hope they go with it. So I hope like the next gen Synapse or even an update to this Synapse, they should be talking to DT Swiss and getting that Son Dynamo equipped wheel set. So you stick a dynamo on the front of that, which is charging that battery, and you've got
completely self-sufficient bike. We haven't actually said, by the way, but I'm sure you've guessed that the Synapse won this category.
To be honest, it was one that I really mulled over, because you can't argue with how good value that Boardman is and how much of a capable bike it is. It's got a bit more, it feels a bit racier handling wise than the Synapse. But again, it's a bit like the gravel thing. The Synapse is just so much more refined. And now you could argue that's because the Boardman comes with 30mm tyres and a slightly narrower rim. This comes with 32s, which on these broad differential sized rims push out to over 35. And I thought, well, is it just the tyres that's giving me that? Luckily, both bikes are SRAM equipped. Just swap the wheel sets over, ride them back to back. And no, this is just a much smoother, much more refined bike. And it's just it's all the things that, that your head will tell you that a good endurance bike should be. It's smooth, it's comfortable, it's stable. But then it won my heart as well because it handles so beautifully. It's so capable. It's so fast downhill. You know, the big tyres, loads and loads of grip, proper knee down corner and stuff, and you can really, you know, and if you run out of road and you hit, you know, you hit some gravel or whatever, okay, it handles it. It just, and it's completely bowled me over. It's been the best Synapse since the 2014 Synapse, which coincidentally also won Bike of the Year.
I was going to say, how many synapses have won Bike of the Year over the years? Because it's at least those two for sure.
It's just two Synapses. I think there's a Super 6 Evo in there somewhere as well.
But that original Synapse, it followed the proper Synapse brief. It was a race bike. It was, you know, Sagan Road won it, at, you know, Flanders and Roubaix. It was one of the old power pyramid.
I remember.
Seat tube. I've still got mine. It's changed a lot. I mean, again, it's a bike that won Bike of the Year, and then I just bought it. And I upgraded the hell out of it. You know, I put some zip wheels on it, carbon cockpit, carbon seat posts, the expensive saddle, but I still kept it mechanical 105. So at one point I was like, I've got the most expensive mechanical 105 bike in the world. But since then it's been upgraded. Now it's still rim brake, but it's mechanical dual race. But I still ride that bike and it still impresses me.
Wow.
But this one is like, oh, we remember what we used to do with Synapse. Because the Synapse, it sort of had a difficult middle age, so we say. It got a bit, you know, lazy and
difficult third album.
Yeah, difficult third album. But now this is bang on return to form. And I don't think that Canada would have come up with a bike like this if they hadn't got that really cool team relationship with EF. And because EF have allowed people like Lachlan, who's not a Pro Tour rider, although I'm pretty sure he could be, but he does some incredible things. And it's like they've gone, oh yeah, we don't have to throw all our money at the new Evo or a new System 6 or a new, you know, we can throw a lot of R&D budget at a bike for, you know, as mere mortals. But then somebody, you know, superhuman like Lachlan can get the best out of it as well.
I cannot stress enough Warren's experience as a tester, but specifically in endurance bikes. It is a topic that's, as I've said, very close to you. So I take all of these ringing praises with a great deal of respect. I definitely, I feel convinced, not just by the integration of tech, but I agree, like it's a much more refined looking bike compared to the previous generation Synapse.
And you can see, you know, the design influence on this bike. The front end is all Super 6 Evo. It's got that aero integration. It's got lots and lots of, you know, clever stuff going on. The back end comes from the Super X, which is their super lightweight racing gravel bike. And they've pushed those two together and come up with something that absolutely stands on its own. It's a phenomenal thing. It really is.
Now, of course, Bike of the Year, the way we generally run it is we have these individual categories, but we always, every year, award an overall winner. And after a great deal of deliberation, you two have reached a conclusion. What has won Bike of the Year 2025?
Go on, Warren.
It's this Synapse. I mean,
big reveal.
It was a really tough thing. It would be quite easy to go with, you know, the Cervelo, the S5, because it has set a new standard for how usable a racing aero bike can be. It'd be easy to talk about a Parley, you know, because of its refinement, its wonderful, you know, on-road and off-road manners, and not to mention just the sheer quality that you're getting with it. But what we sort of decided around this Synapse was like, it does everything an endurance bike should do, and it's brought in this layer of tech, and it's brought in this layer of kind of user experience, which it's almost like a flag to say this is where bikes are going. You know, this sort of integration that they're putting into this, we're going to see across the board. You know, we're going to see this sort of thing brought in. We've already seen a few other brands. You know, Canyon are doing some similar things to SmartSense right now, and they're not going to be the only ones. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, the next generations from the big boys, from Specialized, from Giant, you know, are all going to start looking at things like this and going, that's really usable. You know, that gives the rider a much better experience. I don't know if it's going to be quite so popular with shops, because you can go in and buy this bike and that's all you need to buy. It's like they're not going to be able to sell you any lights in the winter. You know, so I wonder if there'll be resistance from retail, but as an actual bike buyer, I mean, you know, why the hell not?
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, focusing on Smart Sense, for sure, the previous generation, it wasn't as tight as it could be. But like, there's been fits and starts of similar levels of integration from other brands in previous years, whether it's like universal mounts with the Bond Treasure stuff. I can't remember what it was called, but like at the time they wanted to bring in these like all-in-one bikes, but no one has done it as well as Cannondale yet. You know, I really agree. I like dynamos very much, and like that's a more niche concern. But even then, their adoption by more mainstream manufacturers, which will give a bit more flexibility to this kind of setup, I think you're totally on the money. I think this is where bikes are going to go, and it's also like an actual leap ahead versus just iterative changes to bikes. They're going to bring something genuinely new to bikes, which will capture the imaginations of consumers and they'll sell more bikes. Great, people want that. But as you say, it's actual practicality improvements as well.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if I'm really honest, you know, I'm approaching my third decade of doing this, and so when something this genuinely new, this genuinely innovative comes along, I'm like, yes, thanks. You know, thank God. You know, it's about time. You know,
something new to talk about.
Well, not even something new to talk about. It's just something that just seems to be pushing the tech forward. It's like when, you know, proper aero started to come in. It's like when people actually started talking about, you know, tyre widths. When I remember when we were talking about tyre widths, when people were going, you don't want to have a 23 over a 21, it's going to be much slower, and all these things that have been pushing, electronic gears, disc brakes, all these things that actually shift things forward and make things better. You know, I'm all in for that. You know, it's what I want to see. You know, I don't think we could quite easily be here sitting here now, you know, in 2025 talking about, you know, a bike of the year that's a bike that was basically unchanged since 1985. And what would be the point in that? You wouldn't see that in any other, you know, any other tech-driven, you know, design-led sport or piece of transport. You know, so, you know, Cannondale really deserved the applause for this bike.
Wise words. I think that's a pretty tight point to close on. I really enjoyed watching this year's Bike of the Year unfold from the sidelines. I mean, I don't think I've got it in me to do as much testing as you two do, but I think the bike, as you say, really encompasses a lot of what's exciting about bike tech in 2025, and I do strongly believe a sign of things to come. And I'm sure, Warren, you'll have much more to say on the subject as well. If not, then I'll commission you to do so. 2026 awaits, but of course we are going to talk a little bit more in a future vodcast about sort of trends we've seen across bikes as a whole over the last year, just a bit more of a reflective look on how this year's test unfolded and the general picture for cycling tech going forward. But in the meantime, you two have been great. Well done. Lots of great work. Really enjoyed this year's test. And of course, if you would like to read, all these reviews are over on BikeRadar.com, along with the winner stories, all that good stuff. Thank you very much to both of you. It's been really good. Really enjoyed reading Bike of the Year this year. And thank you again to Austrail, our sponsors, for making Bike of the Year possible this year. We'll speak to you again very soon.